Chapter 3, we're going to look at some more contaminants, some other chemical contaminants, physical contaminants, and we're going to look at accidental and intentional contamination of food. So, physical contamination is probably one of the most underreported type of contaminants in food. We do get a lot of information on the microbiological contaminants and chemical contaminants, but there's not a bunch about just how many people actually get hair in their food or have found a fingernail in their food. But these are going to be some common objects that are in food that are considered contaminants. Metal and wood, fingernails, staples, bandages, glass, jewelry, dirt, and for us in the retail production of food, naturally occurring items such as pits and bones and shells are physical contaminants. So what happens if someone eats like a piece of metal or glass? Well, they're going to get a mild, injury or maybe a fatal injury as possible if it's ingested so obviously it could cause a cut or dental damage or choking, and with that comes bleeding and pain. And so what are we going to do about it? Well, we're going to inspect our food. We're going to purchase food from reputable suppliers and implement things like x-rays and metal detection and filtration of foods. And then during the production of foods, we're going to practice good personal hygiene, removing jewelry and preventing physical objects like glass falling in the food from light bulbs by covering light bulbs or buying shatter-resistant bulbs. So there's a lot of strategies to prevent physical contamination of food. Chemical contaminants include things like cleaners and sanitizers and polishes and lubricants and pesticides and insecticides and herbicides and antibiotics given to animals. And also some metals are toxic like copper and pewter and zinc and mercury. And some painted pottery could be toxic. Certain things like deodorizers and first aid products and hairsprays and hand lotions could be toxic. So be mindful of chemical contaminants. So you're going to know pretty quick within minutes if you've ingested a chemical or have some type of chemical contaminant. Things like an intolerance, which could cause vomiting or diarrhea, are typical. So make sure you call local emergency number, consult poison control and the material safety data sheet. So what's our prevention strategy for chemicals? Well, make sure you're using chemicals as they're intended to be used. Use chemicals that are approved for food service. Store chemicals away from food. Make sure they are properly labeled and follow the manufacturer's instructions. So I got to remind you that certain chemical contaminants come from metals like copper and pewter and zinc. And if we prepare or hold food like acidic foods in those type of cooking containers or storage containers, then it's a possibility for the acidic food to leach or suck out the metal into the food and causing your customer to get sick. This could happen with equipment or utensils or even plumbing systems, pipes, where something could backflow into those pipes and create a chemical contaminant. So you want to make sure you're servicing your beverage machines. You want to make sure you're monitoring the use of certain metal pots, pans, pitchers that are made of copper, pewter, and zinc. So make sure you're using all chemicals the right way. Make sure you're labeling your chemicals with a readable common name. Make sure you have on file the material safety data sheet, or now called safety data sheet, or SDS. And when you discard empty containers, make sure you're following regulatory concerns and manufacturer's recommendations. So unfortunately, we have to talk about a thing called deliberate contamination of food. You know, the data tells us that about 48 million people a year get sick from food, but we believe that that's all accidental. Majority of that's accidental. We really believe that, but there are instances where potential deliberate contamination has been investigated. So we want to bring up this thing called food defense. It's protecting the food from intentional or deliberate contamination. More than likely, it'll be from a disgruntled worker or former staff member, maybe a vendor or supplier, competitor, but it could be an act of war through terrorism or some type of activism. So always be alert. We're going to talk about the alert tool. So what is ALERT? Well, ALERT is an acronym which is designed to help you be mindful of deliberate contamination. Each letter of the word ALERT has a specific meaning to help you implement a strategy to protect food that's at risk. Well, what food would be at risk, you say? Well, it's any food that you don't have a program in place to protect. Then that food would be a potential risk. So A, assure. Make sure your products are received from safe sources. L, look. Look after or monitor the security of your products and your facility for that matter. E, employees. Know who all your employees are so that you'll know who's required to be in the facility or who should be in the facility. Track all visitors, contractors, subcontractors, and their movement. R, reports. Keep information related to food defense accessible. Understand which foods could be at risk and have reports available. T, threat. So I'd like you to have a plan in place for responding to suspicious activity, or perhaps someone threatens your organization or operation. What would you do? Alert. ALERT is an acronym which helps us defend or protect our food from deliberate or intentional contamination. Food allergens. Food allergens are a major concern in the food industry. It's the number one reason why foods are recalled by the USDA and FDA. Well, what's the deal with food allergens? Well, let's talk about it a little bit. Food allergens are a protein in a food or ingredient that some people are sensitive. These proteins are natural to the food, but for some reason the person's body cannot identify that protein. And when enough of this allergen is eaten, then a person could become ill or perhaps die. As a food protection manager, we are called to know a few things with regard to allergens. Number one, we need to know the 8 common allergens and know where they are at all times and be able to explain all the ingredients to all the menu items to customers. And number 2, we need to know the symptoms that are caused by the ingestion of these allergenic proteins. So let's look at the symptoms. Nausea, wheezing or shortness of breath, hives or itchy rashes, swelling or of body parts such as the face or eyes or hands or feet. Things like vomiting and diarrhea are common, and abdominal pain. There are some serious symptoms such as anaphylactic shock, and that can cause or lead to death. So what are the major food allergens? While more than 160 food items can cause allergic reactions, just 9 of those account for 90% of all allergic reactions. These 9 foods are called the Big 9. Let's take a look. Milk, eggs, fish, finfish, crustacean, shellfish, including lobster, shrimp, and crab, wheat. So make sure you're always reading the food labels for all the products or ingredients coming into your facilities at all times. Pecans. Federal law requires that manufactured foods or packaged foods that contain these allergens clearly identify them in the ingredients label. This is a common prevention measure, is knowing all the ingredients to all the menu items all the time. And a way of doing that is by reading the labels. Another great strategy for preventing allergic reactions would be to have service staff, or at least one person on duty or on shift that can describe all the menu items to guests, identifying the major allergens to them, and then perhaps suggesting other menu items without allergens. There are other strategies like clearly marking the order of people that are concerned with allergenic proteins, and being mindful to deliver their food separately to prevent cross contact. Well, what is cross contact anyway? We're told to avoid it, but what is it? Well, cross contact is allowing a allergenic protein or one of those foods, those 8 common foods, to come in contact with another food that is not a major allergen, or another surface that could come in contact with a food that is not a major allergen. So we're mindful of all surfaces. We're mindful of cooking oils and utensils, cooking vessels. So someone that communicates a sensitivity to a shrimp allergen and then is asking for our chicken tenders or fried chicken, and we know that those are potentially fried in the same oil, we would want to fry those separately, pan fry those, and of course asking our customer for additional time to prepare those safely for them. So always be mindful of cross contact and allergens by, again, reading labels, knowing all the ingredients to all menu items all the time, practicing good washing, rinsing, and sanitizing of all utensils, cookware, food contact surfaces, making sure that allergens do not touch other food contact surfaces or foods, utensils. Wash your hands, change gloves frequently when preparing food for those with allergenic protein sensitivities, and make sure you label packaged food on site for retail sale.